Part 52. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Buletin Lau Buletin Si Buletin Me. Chapter 511. Among the gods, there are not many gods with the terrible power of the magic goddess. Such a defection undoubtedly surprised many people and forced them to beware of the omnipresent master of hell. This precaution did not last too long, because with the fall of the magic goddess, drastic changes had begun to occur in the world. The gods had no spare time to pay attention to the war on the main material plane. The continuous invasions made the entire world of gods feel in danger. One by one, the gods were attacked by the devil, not as fierce as the magic goddess, but it was this kind of slow and long-lasting attack that made them despair. They didn't know when it would end and how to solve it. The extension of hell, the kingdom of the magic goddess, the devil can easily use the loopholes between the laws to invade other worlds. Whether it is to the kingdom of the gods or to enter the other plane, it is like a shortcut here, with extraordinary effects. At the same time, with Veronia's name disappearing from the ranks of the kingdom of God, the believers of Veronia, who accounted for more than a quarter of the mages in the surface world, felt a sense of deprivation of power. Although they were still mages, they lost their divine power and lost their past power and status. They were at the end of their rope. A plot directed by the system has been circulating on the internet recently. The video of the fall of the goddess of magic has been circulated. Many players in the light camp mourned the departure of the gods, scolded the shamelessness of the evil camp, and expressed their determination to resist to the end. In the main material plane, the war is still going on. It is difficult to tell the winner between the two rival camps, even if there are still an astonishing number of demons to drive. In front of gold, this is a pure and fair money war. Without the participation of technology, when the game technology is equal, the winner becomes the illusory economic force. Every battle is billions of cash, and it will continue. So far, there have been several large-scale wars and hundreds of local conflicts. The last time Sun gathered players to attack the two places of the evil camp, Talangar and Desolate City fell respectively. A large number of troops were used to trap the surface coalition, and the matter was left unfinished. When returning to a few days before the fall of the magic goddess, the army surrounding the elf world launched a surprise attack, joined forces with Frostmourne and Gujingwe, two traitors, and successfully hit the elf kingdom. They not only defeated hundreds of unicorns, Pegasus, and Moonlight Saints from the kingdom of God, but also killed the elf queen, forcing the Phoenix Council to split into two. The main battle line is glued at the border of Moreas. Just after the last conflict ended, both sides invested tens of billions of funds again to prepare a new wave of offensive plans. They hardly need to worry about any worries. Hundreds of billions of funds seem to have entered the pockets of the 9 major banks. When the game ends, as long as the conditions are met, they can definitely recover much more funds than before. When the door and heaven disappear, there will be only one organization in the world that hides behind the world and guides destiny. No one can compete, unless it is an internal conflict. Although the real figures have not been disclosed, in fact, the 9 major banks do not want to panic billions of players in the world who are not very clear about the truth. So far, the invisible funds in the virtual world have expanded to 5 trillion. What is this concept? It is equivalent to the GDP of all countries combined for more than 1 year. Although it is small and has no impact on the operation of the earth, people do not feel it because spiritual consumption accounts for a large proportion of people's consumption. As long as such a sum of money appears out of thin air, it is enough to use it as a fulcrum to lift the lever of the whole world change. The far north world is deserted. The original Iskar Knights resident, 30,000 rebellious knights led by Samael left and became a pawn in the Locke Consortium's plan. This place has become a no-man's land, and all that can be seen are ruins and corpses. Dozens of heroes are moving with difficulty. The advent of the doomsday makes the snow full of dangerous demons, and demigod-level demons are everywhere. Even this group of heroes with an average level of 130 are still in danger of being wiped out. The one rushing in the front was a dark elf wrapped in a cloak. His name was Ethelduin. He had a legendary experience. His betrayal of the dark gods, his yearning for freedom, his dedication to light, and his repeated battles with the evil gods were widely sung by the bards. The artifact cloak Wings of Nothingness on his body was the masterpiece of the god of thieves. It had the function of permanently hiding the aura and preventing anyone from discovering the people around him. As a result, the big devil flying in the sky did not notice the existence of such a strange team. After taking a look at the map, Esadun said to the people following him, "We are almost at the blood-tide lake. When the time comes, we can find the existence of the Gate of the Abyss and complete the mission." "That's right, Esadun. There are 3 more fortresses to avoid 200 kilometers further north. There are hundreds of thousands of devils stationed in each fortress. Finally, we need to enter the burial city where the devils are entrenched, pass through the Gate of the Abyss, and enter the Forgotten Tower of Time." Flying beside him is a little elf, a pure energy structure, and the same king status of the elemental world as elemental lords like Wendy. But she is not from the elemental world, but the kingdom of God. She is a friend of the elf god Cessida, and came to the lower world specifically to help them. In addition to Esadun, you can also find many celebrities recorded in the history of the country, such as Beast King Oro, fallen god of war Bart, and Serpent Queen Xylii. Their reputations in the past may not be very good, but after accepting the call of the Lord God, they have to temporarily forget their hatred and work together. This group of heroic NPCs is not as easy to deal with as imagined. In addition to having an AI comparable to the devil, most people have 2 or 3 legendary items, or even 3 artifacts, which are almost the same as demigods. A dozen players followed them, all of whom were in the top 1000 on the level rankings. Fortunately, they did not die in the tragic war between the 2 camps and participated in the largest personal branch task in this doomsday war. They have to find a scepter, a key that symbolizes status, to call on the great Samio, the most omniscient and omnipotent among the gods. In the chaotic era, the order among the gods was not like today. The god of glory and the god of justice were completely unknown, and the world was not a human world, but belonged to all races. Except for the ancient elf gods and dragon gods, there are only a handful of gods that still exist today. The gods exist because of faith, and they are connected to the fundamental laws of the world. Each law symbolizes a god, and each law corresponds to a priesthood, and they are related to each other. Because of the existence of laws, the chaotic world has order, otherwise matter is just matter without the constraints of laws. Several gods have existed since that era, but after countless eras, people have long forgotten what they are called and where they exist. Samio is one of them, an extraordinary god, the most common king of gods among the gods. However, because of his power, he is integrated with the world. He does not have complete consciousness. Although he has a human appearance, he often falls into a long sleep. It is said that other gods who had existed with him have long disappeared and become part of the world, but only Samio still exists. After experiencing the Dark Age ruled by the goddess of darkness, the gods fell, and the collapse day resisted by the god of elements. Countless gods who participated in the war disappeared. The wars between countless gods for tens of thousands of years, and the fall and rise of gods, have created the world today, such a world of gods. If you know the mysterious order association, if you investigate in depth, you will understand that the order association believes in Samir. Legend has it that Samir once made 7 prophecies. Each prophecy will be one step closer to his awakening. When the 6th prophecy comes true, his believers will complete the last step, awaken him, and welcome his return. With the approach of hell, I am afraid that only the great Samir is the solution that the main gods can think of. When they arrived at the blood-tide lake, they saw a terrifying lake that was completely replaced by blood. The stench became more and more difficult to control because there was no Ice Knights. Less than half a year after the demise of the Ice Knights, a demon lord targeted this place and built a huge city. Along the dark path at the bottom of the city, everyone put on a cloak and smeared with monster feces to conceal their identities. With the magical wings of nothingness, even the keen hellhounds could hardly detect their identities. Players turned on the record function, which would be the pinnacle of their gaming experience. Every player was proud to be able to follow the NPC to complete a milestone mission in the history of the country. The passage that was several kilometers long was full of devils, and no one was allowed to approach the bottom of the lake. However, they could not stop the heroes' will to move forward. The battle broke out, and groups of devil legions continued to emerge from all over. The heroes fought bravely under the siege of the devils, constantly breaking through the siege, breaking through the blockade of heavy defense, and came to the bottom of the blood-tide lake. The bottom of the lake is a spring-like thing, the ruins of the gate of the abyss, but it can still play a role. As long as you enter it, you can find the scepter, but the devil lord far away in hell found them and frantically ordered his subordinates to resist. Not long after, hundreds of big devils died in the passage leading to the bottom of the lake. The violent barbarian Bart fought endlessly, even though his body was covered in blood, his will supported his body. "Go! Leave me alone," Bart shouted, throwing out two short blades, piercing the bodies of two big demons. Essadun rationally called out to the players who still wanted to move forward, shook his head, saluted his old friend who fought side by side with him, and waved to lead the players to charge forward. A demigod-level judgment demon swung out 6 sharp blades and stabbed Bart's body fiercely. The barbarian still did not fall down, but howled with his eyes wide open, hugged the judgment demon and twisted its head off. The stalemate, the big demon next to him continued to attack, the power of the curse made his body lose strength little by little, and with the second attack of the judgment demon, Bart finally died on the road. The dark elf looked back. Even though he knew that looking back was a wrong decision, he still saw the scene of Bart being killed. In order to get here, they did not hesitate to bypass the fortress with many demons and enter the forbidden land of death where monsters were rampant. The number of companions was decreasing every day, but they finally stood at the bottom of the blood-tide lake. A dark hole swallowed up the surrounding light, and they jumped in. Hope is right in front of us. It takes at least half an hour to upload a chapter, but the NPC part is almost the same in the future. It will basically be all players, it's just a matter of time before it ends. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lau Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 512. On September 28, near the whirlpool in the southern part of Moreas, more than 2 million troops from both sides gathered here. Any strategy will eventually turn into a direct confrontation between armies. Means cannot solve all problems. Shen Xian knows this clearly. And there will never be many decisive battles of this scale, which are enough to affect the entire war situation. The cost of such an army is 40 billion, which is 5 times that of normal times. When the war is in full swing, everything becomes expensive. Resources and labor costs are never comparable to peacetime. Shen Xian stood on a hill near the whirlpool, and the gate of the dead lingered around him. The breath of the dead in the surrounding dozens of kilometers greatly reduced the role of the clergy. Although they knew what to do to solve it, the other party never had the confidence to kill him. The surrounding vegetation no longer exists. The whirlpool is a relic of the war, as if it has been transformed by supernatural forces. There are flying sand and stones everywhere. Looking down from the sky, you can see a strange scene. The battlefield with a diameter of dozens of kilometers is circular. The terrain becomes lower as it goes to the center. The gullies of the land are spiral-shaped, like a whirlpool, converging to a point in the middle. On both sides of the whirlpool are densely packed military camps, each of which has at least 10,000 people stationed. It is almost impossible to find influential NPCs. After such a long battle, Basically, most of the NPCs are dead. The number of troops dispatched by the two camps is not much different. They have tried their best. There is no third-party factor that can affect the war situation around them, or even the entire Night Star continent. As for the war between the other two continents, in fact, because both sides think so, the Broken Continent and the Far East Continent are still tied, maintaining a situation similar to theirs. How to fight? The players of both the D Alliance and the Evil Camp are waiting for the Lord's words. It is not so easy to answer. But Shen Xian still prepared a series of long memoranda, explaining the enemy's information, weaknesses, and precautions first. Then comes the tactics. Is there really a strategy for a war of 1 million people? If they were scattered all over the place, they would probably still exist. Since they are gathered together, they don't exist. When Shen Xian finished speaking, the war outside had already begun. Each commander returned to his army. In the center of the vortex, the fighting continued. How much confidence do you have in the war? Not much. This is no longer a war that I can influence. If you compare the two sides' participation in the war and the gap between the two sides, you will understand that I didn't have much confidence from the beginning. Direct conflict is just a means of rapid consumption. If both sides have 10,000 soldiers and send out a soldier every day to compete, I'm afraid the war will be endless. Shen Xian didn't care about the consumption. For ordinary people, their investment can be summarized in 2 words: burning money. For them, doing so is just a solution, just a virtual loss under the rules of the game. Knowing the ending, but can't let it go. Even if this is not a strategic focus, there are also certain goals to be achieved. The Battle of the Vortex lasted for a week. Just as Shen Xian thought, Heaven, which has an economic advantage, finally had a slight advantage and successfully drove the players in the surface world back underground. The plan of Hell's invasion of the gods went smoothly, but the war on the main material plane still showed no signs of winning. Someone has calculated that if the wealth of the world is exchanged into the kingdom in equal amounts, the two sides can fight for a year at the current consumption. In fact, the two sides cannot fight for such a long time. As the consumption increases, they will inevitably have a big war as they become more and more tired. The cracking of the code does not mean that the goalkeeper has the weight of victory, but it can only make an unpredictable huge variable appear in their dispute. Whether it can be used well depends on people. October 4th. The 13 members of the Heaven organization who have the upper hand live a life that is no different from usual. They don't know what they will face next. They can only consider the trump cards held by their opponents over and over again. Sun walked out of the room, looked at the lively island, and said to the secretary who served him, "Are the things ready?" At this moment, Sheep, who likes to move around, walked over from a distance, saw the big suitcase carried by the secretary, and asked questions. "What do you want to do?" "Go on a trip." "You guessed right. I'm going to put my suitcase next to my bed. When it's over, I want to go on a trip and find a wife." "How could you have such an idea?" "It sounds funny." "That's true, but I think my life would be too incomplete if I didn't do that, don't you think? Although I'm standing at the top of the world, I'm still a human being, not a god who doesn't eat fireworks. Strict self-discipline is a means, not a necessity. I just have such an idea." After hearing his words, Sheep was a little envious. She felt that she had no goals and could only be depressed secretly. After the secretary moved the things into his room, Sun said to Sheep, who was still on the side, "Let's go meet the people from Thales again. They are here. We are not the only ones who control our destiny. In fact, there is no need to think too much. Doing this actually reveals that I am tired of living like this." Sun hoped that everything would end. Perhaps he was used to such a life. However, living in tension every day made him feel tired. Even the CEOs of those groups and shareholders of large companies would think so. He could not guess the Lord's mind. He needed to be on guard. The only thing he needed to do was to consider all the factors that could affect the results in advance. The human brain could not do it. In other words, a wise man would make mistakes even if he made thousands of plans. Even 1,000 wise men would have the opportunity to make mistakes. The Thales Group is one of the factors. It is currently facing crazy acquisitions from 2 other banks. On the one hand, Thales's idea of opening up a space in the country has created huge obstacles, making it impossible for nearly 100 billion yuan of funds to flow out in time and being trapped in the virtual world. On the other hand, Thales has been too sharp in recent years and has adopted too many ways that many people don't like to solve problems. Humans are not beasts. Solving problems by violence alone is outdated. Moral constraints and legal norms are the main theme of the times. Whether it is right or wrong, fair or not, at least, Thales wants to fight against the times, which is obviously too arrogant. Eiffel, the director of Thales, was standing on the road of the island, speeding along the coast and feeling the sea breeze. He was very satisfied with the environment of Heaven Island. As a man pursuing art and life, Heaven was like the Garden of Eden, which had an unparalleled temptation for people. Let's get to the point, Mr. Eiffel. The people talking to him were Sun and Hummer. In the past month, Chengdu Bank and Hamburg Bank have been acquiring Thales's industries, and will become the main shareholders of Ore Company and ES Airlines respectively. In addition, in recent years, Thales has been trying to create a new market in the virtual world. A large amount of liquidity has entered the virtual world. Due to the ultimate mission, it cannot be exchanged out. It is currently suffering from a joint raid from the seabed, the other plane and the northern elf world. Hemmer put on his glasses and briefly explained Thales's affairs as a necessary step in the negotiation. Our conditions are very simple. We will exchange the territory of the Thales Group for cash. As a businessman, you should clearly realize the importance of a win-win situation. Please forgive us for giving such a price. Eiffel came with the intention of Thales's upper class, but he was just a wage earner without much power. He saw the price offered by Heaven, which was a bit low, but Heaven, like them, could not wait patiently. In Thales's situation, such a sum of money was enough for them to catch their breath. When there is money and the coalition government, they can expel these outsiders. The current policy is too relaxed, which has caused Thales to be careless and create a crisis. It is impossible to survive the crisis without paying a price. Mr. Eiffel, have you considered it maturely? Time is short, and you should have seen that the war will not go on in this cycle. It will eventually break the balance and lead to the result. Sun said in an orderly manner, or, contact now, we can quickly finalize it. According to the current situation, Thales is still in a critical moment. Thank you Mr. Sun for reminding me, I can make a decision on your behalf, Eiffel said, hoping to see the specific content. This is what he needs to discuss with Hummer. It is his great honor to meet Sun. Due to historical reasons, Heaven not only has a strong economic power, but also has enough records of cooperation with other forces, such as the Alliance. They have too many partners to choose from. Even if these partners are unreliable, Heaven is enough to control them until they decide the winner and then have a meeting to divide the spoils. In the eyes of most people, Heaven is an adventurer who likes gambling, and the gate is more like a dragon covered with treasures. This is determined by the nature of the two organizations. When Eiffel completes their cooperation, this will be the third major force that Heaven cooperates with. In any case, they have done what they can. Now, they should resign themselves to fate and wait for God's judgment. It has not been uploaded from 9 to 11 o'clock. It is better to upload it in the early morning. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 513. Shen Xian connected to a giant computer. Since Kingdom, the research and development of artificial intelligence has made great progress. The power of the human brain is limited, but artificial intelligence has almost unlimited potential to be explored. With the help of artificial intelligence, his consciousness can be infinitely extended. He can touch every corner of the world and watch the ups and downs of the world. One person can control a city without problems, and a group of people can maintain a country without major problems. If you want a country to eliminate problems, you can only rely on computers that never make mistakes. He is still looking for solutions that can be improved. In front of him, there is darkness, no light, and no way to get out of the maze. The two competitors still need to fight and grope in the maze until the last moment. The total amount of funds they consumed exceeded 1 trillion. Although they don't know how long it will last, he believes that it won't be too long. Although they still have a lot of spare power, no one wants to admit defeat. However, the game is enough to explain the problem and complete the original agreement. Ganji's bank hopes to talk to the Lord. Shen Xian wants to know what Ganji's bank wants to do. Negotiation or blackmail. This is the 14th offensive plan so far. In the previous 13 times, in the war that lasted for several months, both sides had their wins and losses. It would be a long list to list the data. Not only in the Night Star continent, but also from the Broken continent and the Far East continent. Even in the other planes with the same laws as them, the war lasted many times, countless. The number of players involved is even more incalculable. The 14th time set a new record. The use of more than 2 million troops means that the two camps are almost at the end of their rope. Moreover, this time the strategic deployment is not only in the Night Star continent, but also in the remaining places. Frequent fundraising will inevitably be rebounded. The players' wallets are not endless. The other side is similar and the situation is much better than them. The special envoy of Ganji's bank, Sathi, met the Lord through the virtual conference center. Compared with Heaven's openness, the gate is much more secretive. Heaven has a long history. In the ancient times when the fiefdom could be purchased with gold, Heaven was recognized by many countries. After World War II, this trend gradually decreased, so the gate is a stronghold. Nice to meet you, Mr. Lord. Sathi extended his hand in a friendly manner. Although etiquette does not have much meaning in such an occasion, the two sides quickly got down to business after meeting and put forward their opinions on the war. Indian players did not perform well at the beginning of the Doomsday War. After a period of observation, they vaguely discovered their purpose and missed several opportunities to capture cities. So far, some guilds such as the Great Maurya Dynasty and the Pasha world have maintained quite good strength. On the other hand, other guilds, despite their many successes, are often exhausted in the next war. On average, each player drops 5 or 10 levels. The most record-breaking player dropped from level 124 to level 41, setting a record and being admired by players. The main strategic focus of the 14th plan is still on the Night Star continent. In cooperation with Il Canbella's Devil Corps, they will attack the underground world of the main material plane. The basis of faith is believers. It can be said that the Devil Master is rampant among the gods, but he has not yet reached the point of doing whatever he wants. However, once the largest faith foundation on the main material plane disappears, the gods are not far from extinction. The 9 masters ordered Il Canbella to accelerate the destruction of the main material plane and eliminate all creatures. Their main strategic goal is to confront the player army head-on and cover the Devil army for a long-distance expedition to the west of the Night Star continent. The D Alliance will suffer huge losses as a result. In fact, the result of Il Canbella's capture of the enemy's territory is no different from the result of their own capture. The matter is relatively confidential. The Devil controls countless NPCs to prepare for their movement. There are only a handful of players who know the secret. It is impossible to deny the possibility that the players of the light camp know it, but if you want to avoid it, the result still depends on strength. Shen Xian chose the northern dwarf world as his target of attack. He followed the narrow continental passage to the dwarf world that had never been attacked. However, there were also a large number of players who wanted to change their target of attack. This was not necessarily for the consideration of the entire camp, but only for the trade-off of personal interests. Shen Xian's goal was to convince them that the Ganges Bank symbolized the interests of Indian players. Among us, there are many people who hope to cooperate with the gate, and there are also many who hope to cooperate with heaven. Everyone is looking ahead, hoping to be the final winner. Whether you can convince me ultimately depends on what you can give us, Lord. At this time, it is meaningless to talk about ideals and life. Everyone present has independent thoughts, and what can play a decisive role is still interests. Interests, because of desire, produce sins, and because of pursuit, produce progress. Such a double-edged sword has controlled human civilization for thousands of years, and its figure has never disappeared. So, Hamburg Bank wants to withdraw midway. Ms. Xiao, please forgive me for being just a messenger. As a group, it is controlled by not one person, but a group of people. When external forces are enough to influence the thoughts of many people, we have to make a decision to change. As you can see, Thales has suffered huge losses recently. They forced the government to intervene to a certain extent and invest in the buyback. Whether it can succeed depends on whether most French people are willing to see the group they are proud of become a subordinate of others. As an experienced businessman, if uncontrolled political forces intervene in such a situation, we will have no chance of winning. If it were earlier, we could win over enough internal forces in France, but now it is impossible. It may be meaningless to say regret and pity here, and Hamburg Bank will not accept any persuasion, but I personally still want to know some secrets. Seeing the new head of the Lock Consortium, the envoy of Hamburg Bank did not believe that she was just a talent cultivated through online games. He satisfied Miss Xiao's wish and said politely, "Of course. As an individual, I just want to fulfill my ideal to fight for such a meeting that can be completely replaced by the internet. As an old group, we have experienced countless crises, and there has never been such a crisis that can make most of us feel a sense of urgency. The cause of the incident originated from the threat from heaven. In order to block the last way out of the door and win in the virtual world, heaven must do everything possible to block any assistance in reality. They hope that Hamburg Bank can cooperate with them, and adopt a more coercive method, threatening them that they will sacrifice a large number of intricate chambers of commerce and manufacturing centers established by Hamburg Bank in the main material plane. The conservative value of these territories may reach 180 billion. Among the countries, the developed territories are the most valuable. It takes time and energy, and it is difficult to measure them with money. For a relatively weak one among the 9 major banks, and deep in the continent, they have almost no possibility of resistance. Even if they want to surrender to the enemy, they can't do much help. Heaven made up his mind. In a critical moment, hesitation will eventually lead to failure. Whether it is to use force or soften, it is to target the characteristics of the enemy. There is no doubt that their deterrence has worked on the directors of Hamburg Bank. They have united enough enemies. Now, all they lack is an opportunity to duel. Knowing the situation of Hamburg Bank, Thales Group may soon be restored to its original state. It seems to sell out the future by completely withdrawing the industry from the virtual world, but in fact, it has exchanged for survival. We still have 5 days. By then, the alliance members in the country may change. Whether we can turn the tide depends on the situation in the past few days. Miss Xiao was worried when she said goodbye to the messenger of Hamburg Bank. The first person she thought of was Shen Xian, but she knew that it was inappropriate to ask him for help. She still hoped to solve the problem by herself. Give up? Miss Xiao felt that it was impossible to give up her father's idea, and it was difficult to realize it. Without allies, it means that there is only one person. They fight alone, which is too unrealistic. Maybe there is no perfect thing in the world. What should we choose? At this time, she was relatively relaxed. Shen Xian still needed to consider the door, or he could continue to work after the door disappeared. Now the battle was just for a belief and a persistence. Thinking of the time when he was a little kid and was lured to the road of online games, he was full of emotion when recalling the past. This was also a promise and a repayment. In fact, he had thought that there was no need to keep a promise to a dead person, but the education in his heart drove him to complete it seriously. The layout of heaven was approaching its end, and the door was no exception. Before the showdown, no one knew what would happen or what accidents would occur. In the middle of the night, the lights were not turned off. Shen Xian chose the recipient, wrote a letter, and finally sent the letter to Miss Xiao. The New York soldiers, Yan Yao, were still waiting outside. When they saw him come out, they went to the airport together and boarded the express flight to the United States. The headquarters of Mormon, Yanchinj in Central America. The history of the United States has actually gone through several eras. Whether it is the famous Kennedy family, the Rockefeller family or the Rothschild family, they have now become history. However, the unspoken rule that the economy determines politics has always existed and has become a feature. Today's Mormon consortium is a force that plays a huge role in this country. They have always hoped to make the United States repeat the golden age 100 years ago, so as to make themselves stronger. Unfortunately, due to various reasons, their ideas have never been realized. Please sit down. I wonder what Mr. Shen Xian wants to talk to me about. The old Adam personally made a cup of tea for Shen Xian. It is such an old man who is the backbone of the Mormon consortium and a difficult person to deal with. We used to be enemies, and even now we are still enemies, but I brought a gift. Really? I really want to know what it is. Adam's expression was as calm as tea, and he made a gesture of invitation. Can I meet the assassin of the H organization who survived that year? I'm sorry, he's dead at this point. Adam made a sad expression. Shen Xian had not experienced what happened back then, but he knew that the Mormon consortium was involved in the incident and provided intelligence and convenience. Adam said calmly, if you have any questions, maybe I can answer them for you. Thank you, Mr. Adam, Shen Xian said gratefully. Can you tell me why the H organization attacked the door back then? Concept. Adam said 2 words. Shen Xian was relieved, wrote down the 2 words in his heart, and began to tell a story about the plan of heaven and the door, a modern online game world without NPCs but only players. What will happen next when one of them disappears? Will it continue to develop or radical change? Our civilization does have no enemies, neither aliens nor natural disasters. For such a question, both sides once gave the same answer. Establish the spiritual kingdom of mankind. Kingdom is the prototype of this world, and thoroughly realize some reforms that may be going on in the current world, such as education. The profession of teachers may disappear completely, and the mode of human knowledge inheritance will be completely changed. And the birth of this world is actually just in line with the times. From past history, we can see that the virtual assets of the virtual world are increasing every year, and there is almost no shrinkage. In the end, the virtual world will be closer and closer to the real world, and become a completely borderless and raceless new society. Somewhat similar to the past The Matrix, it is no longer bound by any country. Once this world is destroyed, it will lead to unemployment, social unrest, and economic recession for hundreds of millions of people. In fact, it will become a public and free world. People can work, study, and have fun in it. They can solve a large number of problems that are difficult to eradicate in real life and further guide the evolution of real society. After listening to Shen Xian's words, Adam sighed, I know this plan, and I also guessed what you are going to give to Mormon. In fact, I know that this gift is enough to change our attitude. It is something that heaven cannot give, but I am not ready yet." Adam's eyes froze at that moment, thinking that they looked up at the stars all day long, they did things that mortals did not do, and accepted people's worship, but they still could not change their identity as human beings, and they had human weaknesses, and he had a kind of conservatism and stubbornness unique to the elderly. "Mr. Adam, you have 30 seconds to make a choice, as long as you understand the value of this gift," Shen Xian said. "I have no doubt about the meaning of the gift. I am also worried that you, the cunning one, want to fool me. I even have been dreaming of getting it. So," Adam said jokingly, "I still respect reality and ideals. This is my answer." He stretched out his hand, Shen Xian stretched out his hand, and time froze at that moment. 10 minutes later, Shen Xian walked out with a calm expression, but Yan Yao and the New York soldiers felt a vague sign of success. In the main material plane, on the chaotic battlefield, the two armies faced each other, and there was still half an hour before the judgment day planned by the Lord of Hell. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 514. When Shen Xian landed in the kingdom, the number of players watching the live broadcast around the world increased to 500 million. This was an exciting moment. As the two parties in the arena, no one felt any excitement. On the contrary, there was only complete silence. As if it was a last glimmer of light before death, as if it was a confession before death, they felt the dead silence and coldness in the air around them. There was only the temperature of blood. They could only hear the heartbeat and see the rolling clouds and the vast starry sky. Everything was so close to them. The sun god fell, the world had no light, the goddess of the sea fell asleep, and the uncontrolled disordered water roared and flooded. The gods fell one by one, the plants withered, the beasts fell, and the world was disintegrating. Dust returned to dust, earth returned to earth, and turned into the most primitive four elements. In the end, it sank into a lifeless chaos. The main material plane no longer existed. I don't know how long it will take. When the master gets tired, maybe a new world will be conceived again. They were born for destruction, and evil only exists against light. Looking at the dark army and the solemn players, Shen Xian smiled after a while. Half an hour passed quickly. No one in the sleepless night had the energy to do anything else. With the appearance of Ilkambala, in their eyes, the world fell into complete madness because of his appearance. A village in the orc colony in the north of the broken continent. The earth is broken and the sky is empty. With the inspiration of the ancestors and the strength of the whole village, the village chief Fulkin led the villagers to build such a solid ark. It is still hundreds of kilometers away from the ocean, but when the space storm comes, the power of the law will become extremely weak, and the obstacles that usually hinder the travel to the plane will no longer exist. They will be able to take a ship to other planes. The ark, which is more than 100 meters long, is filled with all kinds of beasts, food, and clean water. On the ark, a strange eagle-beak totem is erected, which is the god worshipped by Fulkin and his villagers. There was a thunderous sound in the distance. Fulkin knew that the orc city in the distance and the dwarf army in the south had started fighting again. He looked up and saw that the wind was very strong. If it blew on his face, he would bleed if he was not careful at level 70. Every villager rushed into the completed ark to avoid the disaster. God said that this was their last day. From then on, the world would return to zero. The sky was black and white. From the shadow part, a group of black troops appeared. On them were a group of barbarians with tattoos all over their bodies. Each of them rode a flying dragon and dived towards the ground. "Everyone be careful," Fulkin took out a javelin from his back. The troll's slender and powerful arms gave them the talent for long-range attacks. A javelin pierced into the dragon's body, causing a 2,400 damage, but it still couldn't stop the dragon cavalry that was rushing in. Carlos came from the Peak Fortress and received guidance from the great tyrant Barossa. He was full of fighting feelings. Fight for destruction. He roared, his muscles bulged, and he was in a frenzy, which made him fearless. He laughed loudly, and used his claws and dragon spear to tear the enemy apart. Blood splashed all over his body, and looking at the hateful eyes of the trolls, this feeling made him happy, the feeling of destruction. He felt the resonance with hell, and felt the innate desire for destruction of every creature. Morality imprisons freedom, and they will break all cages. Fulkin shouted, his throat seemed to be burned by fire, he attacked mechanically, and every dragoon would leave a clearly visible wound on his body. There were at least thousands of enemies in his eyes, and many villagers had not entered the ark. He didn't know if he could wait until that time. Fight. No, Fulkin saw a barbarian trying to cut off the mast of the ark, and angrily threw a poisonous spear. The barbarian, who was pierced by divine power, and the flying dragon under his crotch retreated wildly for several meters, and then the sky began a new round of changes. The black and white reversed world disappeared, the sky began to tear apart, and the power from the void entered the main material plane, plundering the material wantonly and turning it into a part of itself. It's time. Fulkin glanced at the barbarian, and resolutely took out the hand axe and chopped it hard on the cable, a total of 6 places. When he finished chopping, driven by a mysterious force, the ark flew unstoppably into the sky. With the protection of the golden prayer power, the dragon cavalry could not destroy it at all. After a moment, Fulkin fell to the ground, his eyes were closed on his old face. Near Sunset Port, the easternmost part of the Far East continent, Captain Lapsaint looked at the tornado that roared on the sea all night. Since the fall of the god of storms, the natural climate has become moody and worse. So, finally arriving at the port, Lapsaint earned at least hundreds of thousands of gold on this trip. From now on, he can take his wife and 4 children to hide in the mountains together to avoid this disaster. The crew shouted, "Captain! The wind is too strong. Our ship is about to capsize. Hold on. You bunch of wimps, we are almost at the port, don't you want to go back?" Rapsty shouted, "Quick! Get out of the way." A strange scene suddenly appeared in his eyes. Sunset Harbor, the only safe haven in the Far East protected by the god of storms, suddenly disappeared in the black. What happened? He saw the ink-like sea water suddenly parted, jumped high, and blocked in the middle. The ship was not far from the port, but they were separated from each other from then on. When the constraints of space disappeared, soon, the flooded sea water gathered into waves over 100 meters high, advancing towards the land with destructive power, and submerging Sunset Port. The port was swallowed up. In a few short seconds, the large port that had been painstakingly built by several generations and dozens of generations was razed to the ground. Lepistid saw countless red dots appearing above Sunset Port. Each of them was several times taller than humans, with horns and wings on their backs bearing their teeth and claws, holding swords or sickles in their hands, and blazing flames burning on their scaly skin. Devil. This group of terrible creatures from another world are similar to demons. Lepistid has seen weak demons before, but never such a huge one. Everyone prepare to fight. Before Lepistid finished speaking, the blood-red sickle swept down, and the head and body were separated into 2 parts, and died. This sturdy ship slowly sank into the violent ocean with the burning flames and the screams of humans, becoming one with it. With the sharp sound of the horn as sharp as a knife, Zeraman, the dwarf king of the North Wind Kingdom, wielded his warhammer and bravely rushed up with his warriors. In the cold wasteland of bones that buried countless adventurers, they fought with their fellow dwarves from the far north world, the fallen dwarves. Hatred became meaningless, and the same race killed each other. Whenever a duel was decided, it meant that one dwarf would be missing, which made Morton sad. Zeraman still kept his promise. Morden looked at him, his people looked at him, Sun looked at him, and the world looked at him. His faith was still flawless, like a diamond, and he would fight bravely to the end. Hammett, the child of the goddess of adventure, rushed up, and a black breath shot out from his fingertips. This black contained many negative effects such as corrosion, death, poison, and pain, and was the essence of the curse spell. Zeraman was hit by the black breath, and a small hole visible to the naked eye immediately appeared on the legendary armor he was wearing. He did not suffer fatal injuries, but the armor was completely scrapped. The treasure that had accompanied him for more than 300 years, the Dwarf King couldn't help but shed a tear from the corner of his eye. The dwarves fought desperately with each other, and the players were also fighting desperately. Odin loudly provoked Spider-Man, and the two soon fought together. The fight between the two did not affect the entire war at all, and they were in ecstasy. The same was true for other single players. The players who commanded the battle resisted the terrible attack from the light, and the corpses on the ground were endless. The believers of the Sunset God fought with the believers of the Throne of Light and the Eye of Judgment. The remaining knights, the elite private armies of each family, and the surviving warriors of each kingdom finally returned to the battlefield at this moment. Players competed with each other in combat skills, commanders competed with each other in tactical qualities, and commanders, they watched silently and adjusted at any time to exchange for a glimmer of hope. The war still couldn't stop the destruction of the world. The souls of the dead continued to gather and finally condensed into Shenxian, becoming his experience points. His level was about to reach level 150. In the kingdom of God, the Lord of Hell felt the weakening power of the gods. Without replenishment, the result was only a matter of time. The starry sky was bleak. The dwarves of the Council of Skills were quickly exhausted, and the Dusk City, or the power controlled by Shenxian, lost less than 1/5. The kingdom of the North Wind failed, and an army appeared in the distance on time, from God in the southwest. The war continued. Under the Jing kingdom on the other side, the army appointed by Ilkan Bela emerged on the surface, and they were greeted by the defense army on the surface. The players in the surface world were obviously prepared. Seeing the devil appear, they were full of joy. Their number could completely destroy them before causing devastating losses to the western continent. But what no one expected was that the old devil still deceived the players. In the sea water on the west coast, without any player knowing, an astonishing number of evils emerged, taking the opportunity to sneak attack the unprepared surface world. Unstoppable force. Despite prior preparations, it still took dozens of hours for reinforcements to arrive, even though the attacking NPC army was small. No one could plan and strategize, and likewise, no one could see the light of hope. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 515. At this time, the war in other corners of the main material plane was coming to an end. The broken world seemed more dead than ever before. The players who decided the outcome simply went offline to watch this unprecedented war. When the regular army of Dusk City faced the army of Upper God, the official competition began. The number of troops all over the mountains and plains was so large that it was difficult to describe in words. Simple tactics may have some effect on rookie players, but when a group of commanders confront each other, the effectiveness of tactics will be greatly reduced. There were not many fancy things to see. Soldiers fell one by one. They spent countless gold but did not show any advantages. At most, they delayed their death and delayed the end of the war. The legions were sent up, which might restrain their enemies, but immediately, through dispatch, an enemy legion rushed over and restrained them in turn. The back and forth competition eventually reduced the armies of both sides at the same time. Without strategic items, the release of a level 15 spell would be immediately offset by another level 15 spell. The game levels of both sides were almost the same, and the way of fighting returned to a primitive level. The battle line was going back and forth, and the outcome was not clear. In the south, the cities on the coast were being attacked by demons. Ilkanbella's wisdom of knowing everything made it easy for him to know the weakness of the light camp. Now, he caught it and used the army to attack desperately. Don't look at the hundreds of thousands of weak demons. In fact, it is enough to cause damage to the evil camp that affects the war situation. When hundreds of refugees died under the claws of demons, a mysterious army appeared near the demons in advance. It was heaven. No one knew why they appeared. They were led by Clown, but the members were the elite of the elite. The average level was over 100, with more than 3,000 people. The elites killed the demons. Here, there were no accidents that could hinder the use of advanced divine arts and magic. Time barrier. Everything around stopped temporarily. Clown easily killed thousands of demons, still full of blood and extremely powerful. Ilkanbella was also unable to learn their secrets in the first time because of the effect of the time barrier. The Devil sneak attack plan was about to fail because of the appearance of reinforcements. The army led by the New York soldier seemed to be a god descending from the sky and appeared on the other side of the gate of hell. It seems that we have come at the right time, the New York soldier smiled and looked at the battlefield. He thought that he could not beat Clown or Jin Kankan in a single fight, but who could challenge the Ogre House in a group fight? The Holy Spirit squad attacked. Following them were 50,000 NPCs with an average level of 80. It is impossible to confirm why Shen Xian sacrificed the advantage of the main battlefield and used this key army here. What we know is that the sneak attack plan will continue. In the main battlefield, Sun, who was the first to know that the obstacle failed, could not understand the Lord's approach. This would lead to the gradual loss of the advantage of the main battlefield. Even so, he still had to continue to implement the plan prepared in advance. Soon, when the cannon fodder of both sides was consumed, even the players who rarely participated in the battle joined the battlefield. Goldfinger, Songdao, they were all lords of a territory or masters of the Craftsman's Guild, but here, they had to step onto the battlefield and become a soldier to fight for the final victory. Many NPC commanders began their journey of hand-to-hand combat because all the soldiers below were killed. Mist Erlin looked back at the direction behind him. The big demon swept across, and hundreds of cavalrymen in front of him fell to the ground under the power of the earth shaking. The pouring curse energy enveloped the world and turned it into complete terror. On the flank of Dusk City, the two major guild leaders in India were still whispering. Ashoka, what are you hesitating about? Don't doubt our strength, don't doubt the strength of our allies, Emperor Shishan said unhappily. Hearing his question, Ashoka sighed, sorry, I was thinking that in such a virtual war, we thought we could be free, but we still have to make sacrifices for the benefit of the country. This is our obligation, I have the same idea as you. As an evil, we should do what evil should do. We can't get rid of our identity in reality. Seeing Ashoka's sighing expression, Emperor Shishan said helplessly. But, can this really bring happiness to our people? As a noble son, I have thought about the same question as you, but when I gradually grew up and became sensible, I no longer thought about it, because I know that I am not the savior who can change the status quo. I think, I am the president, I just need to fulfill my duties. The main forces of the two major guilds are still in the hands of the presidents. The combined 400,000 troops can change the balance of power in an instant. They are waiting for the instructions of the one who decides their fate, anxious and passively attacking. Shen Xian saw the commotion in the army not far away, but his mood was still as calm as Shishui. He was used to seeing life and death, love and hate, and he became more and more indifferent to such feelings. Chris was still fighting in the Far East continent, and Frostmourne dispatched his logistics to continuously send even one soldier to the front line. Their advantage was accumulated bit by bit in this way. The time was almost up, and he suddenly thought of it, so he subconsciously contacted the Lighting Guild, 3D0 Studio and Ubihard Studio, and asked them to cooperate in the action. In another corner of the battlefield, the army that was supposed to attack the evil changed direction. Sun saw the change in the army, smiled bitterly, and said to Steel and Sheep beside him, "People say that there are no eternal friends in the world, only eternal interests. I didn't expect that even the Mormon consortium could be bribed." Sun actually found it difficult to understand the actions of the Mormon consortium, a defector that should not appear in the plan, even if he had thought of it before, but resolutely excluded it. Do we need to notify the Pasha world and the Great Maurya dynasty to take action? No. Sun shook his head, it's meaningless. We must understand that the two are not at the same level. Since the gate can make sacrifices, then we can never change the status quo through our allies. Don't resist anything. Steel was a little puzzled. No, it just means that there is no solution for the time being. Sun still didn't see the look of failure on his face. The sudden defection changed the situation drastically. Although it was known that such a thing would definitely happen at the last moment, no one had ever thought that it would be such a defector. The situation changed, as if they were going to be surrounded. The armies of both sides were still fighting. After all, only a few people knew the truth on such a huge battlefield. The leader of the first Knights of the Eye of Judgment was quickly killed by the great devil Gulliant, but what followed was the holy judgment of the red-robed Bishop Ryokos of the Throne of Light. Gulliant did not last long in the melee and fell down quickly. The high priest of the Moonlight Temple, Whisper, was killed by the Nameless of the Prehistoric. In the north, there is also a branch of the Prehistoric. And Berger, the head of the 3D0 studio, killed Batman of Freedom and then fell in the burst of many shooters. The delayed order made Emperor Shishin and Ashoka worry for a while and then chose to wait patiently. Ilkanbela saw that the situation was going in their favor and thought of a new conspiracy in his heart. While most people were wondering why the Light Camp had not yet taken countermeasures, the fallen temple, 1,000 kilometers away, was deserted. Only a few million weak demons remained in the demon cave that had been rampant for centuries. Most of them were lost in the protracted war on the main material plane and the consumption when the three masters invaded the kingdom of God. Many main gods worked together to open a space gate leading to this place. A total of 10,000 battle mages and magic knights walked out of the space gate, with an average level of 90. Battle mages and magic knights are the regular army of the Order Association. Few players can master the job transfer books of the two professions, and even if there are, they are limited. They were led by a silver-robed mage. If you meet him, you will find that he is Catherine's teacher. He has always hoped that Catherine can fully enter the Order Association. His status is second only to the 7 astrologers of the association. The evil demon king is inside the fallen temple. It's time to destroy him, the silver-robed mage said loudly to the soldiers below, breaking into the palace belonging to Ilkanbela. The old devil was watching the result of the main battlefield until he found the invader. No devil should exist in the main material plane, especially one like you, the silver-robed wizard said respectfully to Ilkanbela. Why waste time? The old devil seemed to know what they were here for. Not long after, the palace was full of remaining devils from the fallen temple. The battle began. The old devil's fighting style was closer to that of a wizard, but his 75 million health points were enough to surpass any god of his level who liked physical combat. He just sat on the throne and allowed his body to be harmed by 90% of physical, magical, and divine spells. Great blasphemy. Doomsday judgment. Soul deprivation. One big move after another was released. The soldiers suffered heavy losses, and the magic knights withstood the stormy attack. Behind their protection, the power of the battle wizards was gathered. What greeted Ilkanbela and his subordinates were banishment, slavery, and many other strange magics that had disappeared from the spell systems of the planes for many years. The two sides were deadlocked, and the power of the Order Association was evident. With the help of the power of the gods, they destroyed the important subordinates of the 9 masters in the main material plane. This was their last struggle. No one knew that the NPCs in the distant fallen temple were directing a wonderful play. When they knew it, Sun understood that he was not without life. This chapter just ended. It felt like there were 2 more chapters. It was still 1 chapter a day. There should be a lot in each chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 516. October 26, Shanghai. After years of reclamation, Shanghai has doubled its size compared to the past. This is the easternmost coast of this metropolis with a population of 30 million. This is the place closest to the sunrise. The strong sea breeze blows through the body, and the magnificent view of the sea and sky in the distance. Standing quietly in front of an unnamed grave in the cemetery on the shore, Shen Xian is followed by Yan Yao, many members of the sect, and even the original members of heaven. There are no words on the tombstone, and no one knows who is buried inside. It seems to be a mystery. Despite this, when people see a group of elites from all over the world, who are obviously from major companies, gathered here, they can't help whispering. This is where Professor Wang is buried. No one can imagine how painful the assassination 15 years ago gave him. A man without legs insisted on surviving and changed the world with his own strength, and cultivated a group of people. But the past has become history. No one will investigate what he has done. Some people's wish is not to be praised after death, but to do something while they are alive. No one spoke. Perhaps silence is the greatest respect for him. Everything is over. Shen Xian gently placed a bouquet of flowers in front of the tombstone and shook his head for the last time. November 11th is recognized as Singles Day. Today is the day of the public beta test of Golden Age. After forcing the government to change the current education system, every underage child needs to receive education through Golden Age. At that time, every child will be assigned a perfect teacher with rich knowledge and high means. From the most basic language, mathematics, to history, physics, and chemistry, even cutting-edge courses will be carried out at several times the speed of the past. Of course, adults do not need to go through such torture. It can be like the online community decades ago. Young people can choose a place to work, live, and even form a partner with the opposite sex and live together. Character ID, night and day, data scanning, education, university, title, none, wealth, overflow, exceeding the upper limit, creating a character. Please wait a moment. Shen Xian quickly logged into the server, transferred the data, and entered the city. I'm in Tianhe City. Shen Xian quickly reported his location to the 2 people. Not long after, relying on the express flight, a moving company sent a whole truck of furniture, clothing, and daily necessities, and finally jumped off 2 beauties. It was Miss Yao and Yan Yao. Although Shen Xian's intention to contact them was known to everyone, they finally showed up with an uneasy mood. Shen Xian opened the door, and there was nothing in the room except the wall. Shen Xian, what do you want to do by calling us here? Miss Yao asked suspiciously. Seeing Shen Xian's ID and thinking of her own ID called Dabake, she really felt that this person was too annoying. This is a question that is asked knowingly. Shen Xian took out 2 bouquets of flowers like a magic trick and gave them to the 2 people. He said, of course we live together. Don't you think it's inappropriate for 3 people to live together? Miss Yao asked, turned her head and looked at Yan Yao, and found that the woman next to her had no reaction. I don't think so, so be it. Shen Xian pulled the 2 into the room. You don't want to make us a done deal, do you? Miss Yao dodged like a kitten. After all, she was a woman. Although Miss Yao asked the master for women's anti-wolf skills, she didn't resist in the end. The 2 hesitated for a while, not knowing what to do. Maybe the surrounding environment was too real, and it could never be considered the same as playing house. Seeing the not-so-spacious room, Miss Yao wanted to live together in the future, so she asked, "Don't you think it's small here?" She thought to herself that she was a super rich person, so she had to buy a big manor in Tianhe City. "I think it's better to have a small place." "What do you think, Yan Yao?" Shen Xian's face was full of unfathomable meaning. Yan Yao smiled slightly, with a blush on her face, as if she understood the meaning of his words, and remained silent. Miss Yao really had no way to deal with the two of them now, so she could only call the movers in anger and ask them to move the furniture and other things in separately. Soon, the room was filled with a warm atmosphere. The life of Golden Age officially began. A week later. The emergence of Golden Age has extended the human world, but Shen Xian, Miss Yao, and Yan Yao still cannot continue to live quietly. Perhaps they are not people who like comfort in their bones, and do not like a carefree life. Their identities force them to be busy running around in every corner of the world. Gold will shine no matter where it is. After solving many things, they boarded the spacecraft to the moon. There are currently millions of people living in the moon city. With the help of advanced communication technology, they can communicate with the Earth anytime and anywhere. Every year, the number of applicants who want to settle on the moon is as high as 1 million. Within 10 years, the population on the moon will exceed 10 million, becoming a new country in the true sense. In the comfortable spaceship, the three people looked out at the vast starry sky. Human beings are moving towards the world of their dreams. The three people have just obtained permission to settle on the moon. From now on, they can live freely without any restrictions. For Shen Xian, this is what he has always hoped for. There is no emperor-like harem of 3,000 people. At least, for mortals, embracing two beauties who get along well with each other is the happiest ending. Over. Postscript. The ending doesn't seem to be as much as I imagined, but I think it's almost there, so I won't say any more nonsense. Most of the holes that need to be filled have been filled in. This book may not be very good, but it has been written according to my ideas. After looking at other construction-related online games, I always feel that the main focus is on developing farming on a small scale. Lord, this way I can write more details about life, and because of the identity of the protagonist, this book has to move in the direction of fighting for hegemony. There are not many references that always make me feel confused. As a result, many plots are not easy to arrange. The male and female protagonists' my love is still too weak, and there is no feeling that it will come naturally. If the writing was very detailed, I might be able to write a lot. There is really no need to drag the space to the gods, because the player's character is difficult to play the role of a good god, and the construction flow of the fantasy world itself has no corresponding game to study. Invincible heroes can barely be counted. Immediately the strategic Warcraft is also good. For others, I can only look at the realistic Caesar, Pharaoh and Zeus that I have played before. The recent Anno 1404 is also good. In fact, I am rushing to build miracles. I went there and felt better when I saw the house that filled up the screen. The topic has gone too far, so that's all. The following is the advertising time. The new book The Great Magician of Online Games has changed the subject. The book number is 1376385. In a fantasy world 10,000 years after the ancient century, humans have already stepped into the starry sky, and the center of the world is still the church. Aboriginal creatures in unfamiliar territories, legendary alien species that have become extinct and disappeared, and the edges of the Star Sea are full of traces of heretical activities. Ancient ruins in the void space, magical cities above the prosperous planet, this is a place where adventurers linger. The growth path of a player who chooses the ordinary profession of magician.